Good afternoon. Today we are joined by Drew Capener, a man who's as comfortable debugging Rust code as he is wrangling horses, which is interesting. He's a nationally recognized dressage competitor too. By day, Drew is the co-founder of Filter.io, the go-to platform for Rust job seekers, and a software engineer at Omnibond, where he's helping shape the future of internet identity. By night, well, we'll assume he's dreaming of his next big vision or reminiscing about his days knocking on doors selling pest control. With a degree in computer science from BYU and a fluency in Portuguese, Drew is proof that you can be both a tech wizard and a well-rounded human. So let's dive into his journey and see how he balances building a business, coding brilliance, and maybe still finding time to pet a horse or two. So with that, I want to welcome Drew Capener. Drew, hi, it's so good to see you.
Hey, Jamie.
Regarding OmniPasskey, I know that you're one of the primary developers along with it. So before we even dive too far in, I just want to ask the basic question. What is Omnibond's OmniPasskey and how did it get started?
Yeah, so in short, OmniPasskey allows institutions that run the Shibboleth identity provider to use passkeys as a login method for their users. And OmniPasskey is basically a full drop-in solution that's very easy to set up alongside an existing IDP and provides kind of the full suite of functionality that's needed to work with passkeys.
So you said that OmniPasskey integrates with Shibboleth in academic settings to support single sign-on. How does this relationship kind of enhance its usability for institutions, and what challenges did you face in ensuring seamless integration?
Yeah, so usability-wise, usability is kind of one of the primary drivers for the passkeys standard in general, or the family of standards that come together to make passkeys work. And so the whole point of passkeys is that you can get a passwordless login, right?
Yeah.
And passwords obviously have this long history. They've been around, about as long as the need to authenticate people on computers has been. And they've always sort of plagued us, and especially over the last couple of decades as the internet's really grown, they've become a huge vector for attacks, right? So phishing, where attackers are stealing users' passwords, has become a huge problem. The vast majority of cybersecurity incidents start with a phishing attack because it's really the easiest way to get into a protected system. And so passkeys take passwords out of the equation and give users something that ideally is easier to use in place in order to step up the security profile of a system. Now, one thing that's interesting is when you're trying to secure things, there's always friction and sort of complexity that comes with it, because if you make things really easy, it's really easy for attackers. And so one of the interesting things that passkeys do is they move some of the friction away from the user, because the user is sort of least equipped to deal with complicated security issues like managing passwords in a secure way. And so passkeys take some of that complexity and move it to people that operate IDPs, for example, and people that implement code that enables passkeys. So when you kind of asked about what were some of the challenges, and I don't know if this is the best answer, but I would just say overall it was a challenge to implement this, because this is harder to implement than passwords in some ways. But I think it really is the right thing if we can simplify things for end users, get them not managing their own passwords and doing bad things with them. I think it's a step in the right direction.
I can definitely see that. Now I have to say, so for me, the first time I heard about Passkeys was, of course, with the Mac OS update, and all of a sudden sites started asking, do you want to use Passkeys? For me, it was actually a little bit disconcerting, because I'm used to putting in passwords, two-factor authentication, what was your third grade teacher's favorite color type of information. How did OmniPass come along? Did OmniPasskey come along after the big Passkeys push, or did it come in before?
So, yeah, that's a good question. So, I initially got involved with Omnibond kind of pre-Passkeys. Passkeys were coming along, but weren't anywhere near as mainstream as they are now. And Boyd, our CEO, and Jeff Bate, and others on the identity management team were working on doing a form of passwordless login to Shibboleth with something called verifiable credentials. And they built kind of a proof of concept, Jeff did. And I remember, I think that was like the first thing I saw when I joined Omnibond, was that proof of concept on my first meeting. And so they had this, they understood how interesting it could be to have passwordless login using, cryptography behind the scenes. And we, after I joined, kind of pushed that project along for a while, but it became clear that some of the things around verifiable credentials weren't quite there yet. And some people, to this day, would say that verifiable credentials aren't really well suited to authentication. So we'll see how that shakes out. But while we were working on that, a big announcement came out from Google, Microsoft, and Apple that Boyd immediately sort of zeroed in on. And it was about passkeys. And I remember Boyd said that it felt really important to him because Google and Apple and Microsoft were agreeing, all publicly stating that they're agreeing to support this standard. He sensed that was a rare moment in the market, basically. And so basically after he saw that, came back to the team and asked us to go full force after this Passkeys thing. And that's where we really got involved with this and developed this product. And so that's kind of how it all started.
Okay, so for me to say that again, then Jeff kind of had the proof of concept, and you all worked on it a little bit, but it wasn't a big push because people weren't sure if it was as secure as it seems. But then with the large announcement with the big three, Boyd saw the promise and said, let's do this. Is that kind of how it happened?
Yeah, so all of these solutions that are kind of swirling around in this space rely on a bunch of cryptography under the hood and sort of successfully abstracting that away from end users who of course are not equipped to deal with asymmetric cryptography. And so when we were working on the verifiable credentials thing, that worked well and was secure. The problem was there were ecosystem issues. So there wasn't like an obvious place to store verifiable credentials and to store the keys that would be used for doing the signing and things that were required there. With Passkeys, what we had was all of these platforms, basically every major platform that touched end users saying, here's a place where you can store your keys, basically. And they were saying, we're going to work to make this easy and make it work for you because we see this as important. And so that was pretty obvious that was going to be path of least resistance to get this passwordless authentication thing working.
It's too cool. So then I also have to ask, again, as a user, kind of going back here, security to me kind of means complexity. The more complex the system is, the better it is, for better or for worse, be it true or false. How are the users critical for adoption in this case? Like people with views like me that me just touching the ID button on my MacBook here and letting me in safer than me trying to remember my password coupled with the two-factor authentication. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I have a couple of thoughts on that, and the first one is just I think this is going to be a big, there's going to be education required here, right? Because like you kind of mentioned, it's a big pattern interrupt for people to go from, for example, a password and then an MFA app or an SMS message or email, something like that, to just, doing Touch ID on your computer or Face ID or putting in a PIN. So it feels weird, and of course, asymmetric cryptography is not intuitive to people at all. And so I think there is a big education piece that still honestly needs to happen for mainstream adoption of passkeys. And then the other thing that I think needs to happen, which I think will happen, there's some negativity out there around this, but I don't see this as a big issue. It needs to get easier and more clear. And I think we'll get that from the platforms and browsers and things as things evolve more. In a lot of ways, the passkey spec is still evolving, though it's a lot more stable now than it was previously. And I think a lot of people's frustrations to date have come from breaking changes in past versions of the standard and in implementations by specifically platforms. But I think things are going to settle down there, and that's going to be less of a problem. But that education piece will still remain.
That makes sense. For one time in security history, the good players have it easier than the bad players, so to speak, once it's set up. But having said that, you talked a little bit about security threats and how they're kind of constantly evolving, how the spec adjusts to kind of deal with those changing aspects. How does OmniPasskey stay ahead of those risks? Of course, phishing isn't really going to be a big one because you have to be there or a thing. But with server leaks and maintaining compliance with FIDO and W3C standards, how does Passkey handle all those adjustments as they come?
Adjustments to the specification, is that kind of what you're asking about? So
yes.
We're constantly developing things, constantly working on the product, making it a little better. And it's very interesting. It's an interesting challenge to watch as things develop and try to understand what needs to be implemented, what shouldn't be implemented, understand how things should be implemented, how you make some of these new ideas make sense to end users. So it's kind of the like 1% better every day thing, right? You're just layering these little changes and trying to watch the ecosystem develop and get on the right trains as they come. So that's kind of what I would say. And it is very interesting. There are, some challenges with passkeys in terms of enterprise adoption, where some enterprises aren't totally comfortable with the way that passkeys change the risk model they're dealing with right now. And so there are a lot of interesting things going on at the moment to try and add things to the set of specifications for passkeys to kind of get passkeys enterprise ready. So that's one of the interesting things that's going on for us right now, is like, how do we stay abreast of those very sort of bleeding edge additions to the standards, and how do we think about whether we start implementing them or not? So yeah, it's interesting.
All right, thank you. So I have one last question for you, and you are not prepared for this question. I'll tell you right now. So you talked about how you remember starting Omnibond and kind of getting involved with OmniPasskey. My question to you is, if there's a developer out there that sees the benefits of Passkey and they want to start to address some of those educational concerns and or actually get involved with maintaining a Passkey-like product, do you have any recommendations for them of basic a way to get on that path to push the power of passkeys into the future?
Well, if you're implementing passkeys, there are a number of libraries that provide a lot of the core functionality that's needed. And so I would find one of those, a reputable one in the language of your choice, and use that. Now, as far as the education piece, I don't have an answer right now, although I kind of want to think about it for a minute because it's interesting to me. I mean, I think one of the things that we've found is it makes a big difference. Or I should say, the little things that you do in the UI, for example, actually make a big difference. And there's some really, really hard UI, UX type challenges in this, because it is a totally new thing. You know, if you don't like build stuff, you kind of don't realize how much people are used to certain patterns that they experience all the time on the internet. And so then whenever you have to break those patterns or do something new, it is like this extreme challenge. And that definitely exists with passkeys. And so on the education side, there's a lot that can be done by just really polishing implementations in terms of user experience, and just dialing in the language that's presented to users and the icons that are being used, and how things move and where they are on the screen and all of these things. You know, trying to use some of the patterns that people are used to introduce them to this new thing, while also helping them understand how to operate in this new passkey world. So there's lots of interesting challenges there for sure.
So let's say that you have a CIO at a school that's using Shibboleth, and you want to convince them that you're going to have some short-term pain with your IT operators for them to get this installed, but there's going to be a long-term gain for your users. What would you tell them? How would you kind of guide them through becoming a little bit more comfortable with the idea of putting in that extra effort up front using OmniPasskey or to integrate into Shibboleth in order for their users to be able to utilize the technology.
Yeah. So there are lots of like little arguments I could make about, you know, why it's not going to be that hard, and how you can roll this out little by little and all of these sorts of things. But the big argument is just phishing. I don't have the exact number, but it's something like 70+% of attacks start with phishing. And I think that's specifically ransomware attacks, which of course are the big fear of anyone running, you know, technology at one of these enterprises. And so that's kind of beginning and end of the main argument is, do you want to protect yourself from this huge attack vector or not? Because passkeys are kind of the clearest way to do that, and a relatively easy way to do that. And I think that's an underappreciated point. Even as much as it's said by proponents of passkeys, people get distracted by sort of like the technical details that come downstream of this larger point. But it's super important to improve kind of your risk posture, to shore up any possibility, to block any possibility of phishing.
All right. I don't think it could be better said. The benefits of passkeys: reduce those attack vectors, especially from phishing. Well, with that, Drew, I want to say thank you so much for spending time with us. And we look forward to hearing more about OmniPasskey in the future. Take care, man.
Thanks, you too.